to another episode of Dazed and Infused. I'm Latham Woodward, your host. We're brought to you by Perfect Union, as you can see behind me if you're watching the video version. And today we are with Nick Brandis and Dave Podesta from Headwaters. Welcome to the show, guys.
Appreciate it, Latham. Thank you.
Thanks for
Yeah,
being here.
thank you. Good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here. Headwaters, for those of you who don't know, is a premier grower here in the state of California, down in Carpinteria. Beautiful Carpinteria, land of avocados, surf, and now cannabis. We're going to start the show off like I start every show off, and that's tell us your historical relationship to cannabis and how you came to the game. We'll start with you, Dave. How'd you come to the game, Dave?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to grow up in the San Francisco Bay Area, where cannabis at the time in the late '80s, early '90s was pretty prevalent, primarily seeming to come from Humboldt County and Santa Cruz County. I was actually introduced to cannabis by my brother at the age of 17. He came to me when he realized that I was getting of the age, and he said, "Hey, if you ever need cannabis, just make sure you come to me first." And I actually consumed with him the first time. Had a great time. We watched a movie, giggled, laughed, talked, reminisced a little bit, and I was a fan ever since. After that, I spent about 20 years in the natural products industry, selling vitamins to large chains like Whole Foods Market, Sprouts Farmers Market, things of that nature. And about 3 years ago, after looking into becoming a part of the cannabis community here in California for several years, I stumbled upon a group that hired me. We were in charge of California sales for Dosist. And it was soon after that we were acquired by a company called Final Bell. Which introduced me to Headwaters and Nick and the great team over there. And we dissolved our sales team. Nick approached me with an opportunity to help lead sales here in California for Headwaters and our brand, Mr. Zips. And there was no way I could say no. I helped launch the brand in the retail market. I felt very, very passionate about it, very close to the brand. Nick is a wonderful leader and introduced me to the team. And I just felt so passionate about it that I've been here ever since and enjoying every moment of it.
Right on. Great answer. And Nick, with that glowing endorsement, what's your historical relationship to cannabis?
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you, Dave. Too kind. So similar to Dave, I also grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in the northern part of the Bay Area, where cannabis is very prevalent. It was pretty much all around me, starting in middle school and high school. It's the land of the Grateful Dead, as they say. I first tried cannabis when I was 14. Fresh out of middle school. Soon thereafter, I actually found my mom's cannabis. I found she was a hairdresser, and oftentimes she would actually, I'll save that story for a little bit later when we have a little more time. But I found her cannabis, and I think that just exemplifies that there was never really a stigma around the plant for me. Ended up going to university, studied engineering. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Went into consulting, like many young graduates do when they don't know what they want to do. And I was kind of soul searching for my first few years out of undergraduate, trying to figure out what was my calling. Right around it was fall of 2016, I believe, when California voted to legalize recreational cannabis, and the light bulb just went off in my head. I didn't have the stigma. The monetary opportunity seemed obvious. I was a consumer. I enjoyed it. It was kind of a fun, sexy industry, and I believed in the medicinal aspects of it too in the long run. So I just geeked out over cannabis throughout all of 2017. I was living in Chicago at the time. I reached out cold to anyone I could get my hands on, whether they were a lawyer, an advocate, a scientist, a business person, you name it. And I was lucky enough to get a foot in the door at Ease, which is the largest cannabis delivery platform in the country, I believe, based in California. So I joined Ease right after 4/20, 2018. And I was there for about 3 years, serving as the in a similar role to what I do now, surrounding corporate development and business intelligence, really spearheading their expansion efforts. That was my main responsibility, but I kind of supported all growth, M&A, kind of fundraising efforts as well. And then about 3 years in, I kind of realized I was ready for my next step. I had learned one end of the spectrum of the value chain in cannabis really well, that being the consumer retail branded landscape. I figure if I want a career in this industry, I better get exposure to the other end. So I found Headwaters. I was lucky enough to stumble upon Headwaters, which I'm sure we'll get more into. But Headwaters is one of the largest growers in California, and I've been here for a little over 3 years, or almost 3 years, I should say, in a similar corporate development capacity.
Right on. Well, I think we just found out where I met you before I met you at Ease, man. I remember this well. It was in 2019, I believe, and it was down in Venice, California.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was showing off my brand, Shuggies, at the time, which is now defunct. Well, it's on the shelf right now.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that was the coolest office I'll probably ever work in.
Yeah, it was very cool. Very close to the beach. It was very nice. But
Yeah.
you're close to the beach now, so that's great. For those of you listening or watching at home, I have had the pleasure of actually visiting the Headwaters facility in beautiful Carpinteria, California. And it is nestled right there in the avocado groves, which makes it just an ideal climate, natural sea air coming in all day long. So it's a great environment for growing flowers, avocado, anything you really want, you can grow in Carpinteria. Um, what are you doing right now in terms of your strains? Where are you going with strains?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I can speak to that pretty well. So we one of the things that Headwaters prides itself on the most is our genetic library. We breed some strains, but we mostly do hunting for new genetics. And what sets us apart from most other genetic providers in the industry is we really specialize in strains or genetics that perform well in sun-grown environments.
Mm.
We are exclusively a greenhouse producer. We don't really use lights to assist our production at all. So it's a lot harder to grow genetics in a sun-grown environment with open-air greenhouses than it might be in an indoor setting. And so when we look at genetics, we value, of course, the marketability. There's hype strains out there that everyone's chasing. Everyone wants color and frostiness and a certain smell to the product. But we equally value as well the agronomics, yield, things like that. So that gives you some background on how we approach the genetics that we plant. In terms of where we're going, we tend to have 3 to 5 like year-round winners that we probably keep in rotation consistently for a 24-month period. Right now, those would be Sunshine Punch, Space Rocks, Electra Ice. And those are really the 3, and we're starting to raise a couple more. I don't want to name them yet, just to not over promise. And then we usually have about a half dozen that are in medium-sized production that are usually seasonal. And then we have another maybe dozen below that that are limited drops that we're still trialing out before we devote too much canopy to it.
Right on. And Dave, from your perspective, what's the market looking like for new strains or like heritage strains?
Well, it's interesting because I think that there's a dynamic between the two. When you have a heritage strain, people always want it. New strains is always something that the consumer base and the retailer base is always looking for, based on the fact that, strain fatigue. That seems to be a big issue in California cannabis space. If a strain gets too hypey and overconsumption happens, people get bored of it rather quickly. So having that ability of having those heritage strains along with new strains has been a huge positive for us.
Yeah, having a bank of genetics is super important. I had Anna Wiley on the other day, and we were talking about her strain bank and what she's doing. She's a very interesting woman who's doing a really good job. Also very concerned with not only today but the future. Where they're going in the future. And I think from a business perspective, a lot of people don't understand that it's agriculture, right? You're planning, and I think from the business aspect of it, Nick, for people who perhaps are listening on LinkedIn or through LinkedIn, what's the importance of that plan?
Oh my gosh. That was a steep learning curve for me to learn the importance of the plan, coming from a background in technology and professional services, then going really to agriculture. The life cycle is very long. You can make a change and you won't see the results of that change for 4 to 6 months in our business. So we're constantly planning 3, 6, and 12 months out for what our mother block will look like. We have what we we believe to be the largest commercial nursery in the state of California. We have about 12,000 mother plants at any given point in time.
Mm.
And so we're constantly having to maintain, but also change those out, which is a massive ordeal and requires a lot of preemptive planning to be able to ramp up or ramp down genetics as needed.
What's your test tolerance, guys, in terms of like a strain that you're like, well, let's see how this works, both in terms of its efficacy, its potency, and its entourage in terms of its full like lineup of THCV, THCH, all the aspects of what makes a good cannabis a good cannabis. What's your test run? Do you give things a 6-month run, a year run before you say, this didn't work for us?
Yeah, so we have generally a 3-tiered R&D system. First tier is we get a new genetic. We might plant a dozen or 2 dozen plants just to give it an initial run, right? And see how it does relative to the plants right next to it in our production. If it shows at least some promise, whether from an agronomic perspective in terms of yield or maybe a marketability perspective in terms of bag appeal or potency, we'll ramp up the next run. We'll maybe plant 100 or 200 plants and see how it looks. At that point, if it still looks good, we might devote an entire bed of moms to it, which really equates to batch sizes of 1,000 to 2,000 plants. We are very cautious when it comes to over-investing into a new strain with our canopy. We are a self-funded business, and the opportunity cost is massive, especially with how prices have been in California for the last year or two. So I would say that the time frame is probably 12 months from when we intake a genetic before it can really, we ramp it up to scale, if it even makes it to that point. Maybe 1 in 20 genetics ever make it to a medium-sized scale in our production.
Wow, it's pretty low, actually.
Yeah, that's probably actually generous, to be honest with you.
Wow. That's I don't think people at home understand that, but that's real ag. That's agriculture. It's like, you're growing the best tomato out there, but if you're growing the best tomato that is tiny, that's not going to do you much good. Dave,
Exactly.
in terms of, I want to ask just a pressing question about potency. Okay, the market, especially I've noticed, especially in Los Angeles counties, right? You're looking at the potency issue is just so prevalent in people's minds. Usually, the younger consumers that don't really know about entourage, they don't really understand it, and they're always looking for the higher numbers. Where does that come into your sales strategy and your appeal to consumer? And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I'd like to get your perspective.
Absolutely. THC percentage right now is one of the big selling points by the dispensary to the consumer, and the consumer asking for higher THC percentage points. We come in, we have some that, our range of THC and potency does range. My answer to, if I ever get it's not an X percent, so we can't move forward, is, what really are we looking at? Are we only catering to one subset of customers that are looking for THC percentage, or are we trying to think peripherally about the customer base and look for the customer that's looking for a specific strain, a higher percentage of other cannabinoids, so on and so forth, and try to get the buyer or the person that I'm working with to think a little bit more peripherally about what cannabis really is and what makes a good cannabis plant. So with that being said, Nick touched on this a little bit earlier with bag appeal, smell, strain working for a specific body type, so on and so forth, is really how I try to counteract that question if it ever does come into question for us. And, you had mentioned entourage effect, and, in my previous career being in health and wellness, we have to look at the endocannabinoid system as a whole that gets fed by separate parts. So THC is only one part of what makes cannabis actually work in the body, and trying to educate the buyer or the consumer on that exact fact that, THC percentage doesn't necessarily equivalent out to good cannabis. It's really about the entourage effect and what you're trying to achieve by consuming cannabis.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the audience right now can equate this to their own personal experience, that they bought something that's like 38% or whatever it was, right? And they take it home and it doesn't do anything. And maybe it's just been over engineered to just get that number, right? but it's an experience a lot of people have been talking about, especially in my circle, about it. It's just not the same. And people do harken back to those strains that they really liked in their youth. And Nick, are you from Marin County, Santa Rosa, Sonoma?
Correct, Marin.
Ah, I'm a Marin guy too, so it's nice to see you here.
There you go.
So let me ask you about this CBD, THC, like more medicinal. Do you guys do any of that where it's high CBD?
We really don't.
Hmm.
No. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just not
we're
your get, not your gig.
yeah, we're a very large scale volume driven business.
Hmm.
In CBD, the CBD forward strains are still a smaller minority of the demand in the market. So we focus on the high demand categories.
You got to keep the doors open. I totally
Yeah.
understand that. So let's talk about Mr. Zips. Dave, who started that out? Was it Nick or a collaboration? Who started Mr. Zips out?
Yeah, I can talk about the kind of origination story. Yeah, so we part of the reason when I joined Headwaters back in 2021 was at the time Headwaters didn't have a brand in the market. And me coming from ease, having experience with seeing what works and what doesn't work in the branded space, my first prerogative was to figure out how to launch and scale a branded business. And so obviously we ran through some ideas. There were a variety, some inspired by our owner's Rottweiler dog, one that bear the Headwaters name. But Mr. Zips kind of really turned out to be the winning name and brand concept. A zip means an ounce on the street, right?
Hmm.
Many people buy a zip from their dealer for an ounce when they're buying an ounce. I think it's all pretty well known that the legacy market or black market is still pretty prevalent today. And the concept behind Mr. Zips was, we have such a low cost of production with outsized quality. Can we sell product to the retailer at such a low wholesale cost with such strong quality that the exit price to the customer is still competitive with what they could find on the black market for that quality? And our first SKUs were an ounce and a half ounce, or like we say, a zip or a half zip,
Hmm.
right? On the back of our packaging, it says 1 zip, 4 quads, 8 slices, 28 dime or 28, 14 dubs, 28 dimes, right? We're trying to use the terms that, the OG weed consumer is familiar with. So that was the kind of concept behind the brand. When it came to the design of it, which I'm not sure, I have this kind of a prototype here, but you can see a little bit of the here. It's
It's
blurry.
green also.
Yeah, it's green. Let's see, Dave, if you have anything, I apologize. Dave will show you.
Oh,
There
there
you
you go.
go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so the concept we told our
Hey,
design.
Dave, hold that up again. It didn't flash to your screen, and say something.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, yeah, looking good. Looking good. I like it.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to go to mrzips.com. You can find our products there and where to source them. But yeah, the concept behind the design, we really told our designer we want like kind of a Keith Haring inspired look, sort of like retro street art. We didn't want it to look like a lot of the modern cannabis brands that kind of just look like a slew of graffiti.
Hmm.
We want it to be a little bit more tasteful and also kind of a throwback to the couple, maybe a generation ago. So we have found a lot of traction with our brand in the market, the branding in the market across generations and demographics, which has been great.
Yeah, we always used to say when we were at Hall of Flowers or something, it's like, oh, we used to, use it in quotes as, oh, there goes another Humboldt Thunderfuck brand,
There you go.
just something that's like, whoa, come on, calm down, guys. Hey, Dave, from your perspective, do you find that the retailers are kind of abiding by your MSRP and they're sticking to the ethos?
Yeah, it's pretty close. I think that in our category, in our space, some of the competition is pretty closely, you know, uh, pretty close in that regard. Our MSRP, I think at first, when we first started out, was a little bit higher than we anticipated. And as the market has kind of continued to evolve, it's gotten really close to MSRP. And I think retailers are really seeing the effect of, having a product marketed at a reasonable price is going to equivalate into greater success for them by moving more volume of these particular units. So as we have continued to evolve, the marketplace has adhered to our MSRP.
That is a great news for you, I'm sure. And I'm sure the retailers appreciate the fact that you guys can consistently deliver the product and time and again in the same packaging, same look, same feel, so the customers like it, and then you change it up, I'm sure. Is that right?
Yeah, I think one of the cool selling points is taking a page from a little bit further developed CPG industries and making sure that things are categorized properly. Indica, sativa, hybrid will always have the same color packaging. And I think that, not just the consistency of the packaging, but the consistency of the quality of the product inside of the bag has also been a huge attraction for the consumer. It definitely been a huge selling point for us.
Yeah, I love hearing you mention CPG because, that's where I started out in the game, is like bringing CPG products to the market. And at that time, it wasn't really well received, but we're getting to the point where like branding and that Keith Haring type look is really a good one. I like it. Kudos to your designers, guys. Looking good. So before we're getting toward the end here, but where do you think your guys are going in terms of multi-state? Are you really going to focus on this for a while, really get it down pat? What's the idea?
Yeah, we're not really focused on multi-state at all. What we do best is we grow low-cost, high-quality cannabis. We got to where we are with roughly 25 acres of flowering canopy without the help of outside investors. We're 100% self-funded since day one. We just really got to where we are by having differentiated IP and being prudent cash managers and good business people, right? So we don't step out of our lane. We just continue to reinforce the moat around our core competency, which is large scale cultivation. Furthermore, when you kind of think about 5-10 years down the line, whenever interstate commerce does become a thing, we do think that there will be a premium on California grown cannabis. And like you alluded to at the start of the podcast, Carpinteria is quite a nice climate to grow in. So we're really focused here at home, continue to expand our own cultivation footprint. We are looking at continuing developing and potentially licensing out our IP to other geographies, mostly international. And then kind of more close to home, really what Dave's driving is continuing to grow the brand as what we just consider another customer of our bulk business. Ideally, everything gets converted into owned branded products, which we have a long way to go to get there. But that's the goal in the long run.
Yeah, slow and easy, then. That's the model.
Yeah.
Great. I think it's wise choice, guys. Dave, you want to add anything to that before we get to our final question?
Yeah, I think when eyes get too big, things seem to fall apart. And, keeping the eye on the prize and the focus on what we do best, listening to our customers and not necessarily reacting, but pivoting is critical for us. And I would recommend any cannabis brand in the California space really focusing in on what you do well will bring success. And that's exactly what Headwaters and Mr. Zips has done, is just focus on what we do well and being true to ourselves and listening to our customer base and just trying to be the best us that we can be.
Right on. And I think that the takeaway from both of your comments is beware of the shiny objects. They're just going to blind you.
Yes.
So we're at that point in the show. We're going to ask you both our final fan favorite question. Tell us a Stony story. And we're going to start with Dave. It could be about you, Dave. It could be about your grandma, your uncle, your stepdad, anybody in your mix. Maybe somebody you don't want to mention. Just forewarn you, 75% plus start out with the word brownies. So let's hear it, Dave. Got something for us?
When you first mentioned the Stony question, the first thing that popped to my mind was my mom. And I know that sounds really weird, but when I was I was just out of high school, still living with my parents, kind of in between that senior year and college, I had a few friends over and my brother had constructed a 6-foot bomb. And we were using it in my garage, and not being, thinking of other people around you. My mom smelled it going through the house and came out, opened the door, and said, "Oh my God, you guys are out here killing skunks again. God damn it," and slammed the door and walked away. And the look on all of my friends' faces, and mine probably included, was our jaws just hit the floor like, "Oh my God, we're busted," so on and so forth. And I went and talked to my mom after that, and I said, are you mad? And she was like, "No." She was like, "I was just surprised." And so I knew I had my mom's endorsement on me consuming cannabis at that particular point, but we just had to be a little bit smarter when it came to blowing the smoke outside of the garage.
Maybe you just keep it to a 3-foot graphics bong instead of a 6-foot piece of PVC, my friend. And a good story. That was a new one. Haven't heard that one before. Nick, got one for us?
Sure. Yeah. Alluded to it at the start of the call. I guess this one will be about each of my parents, which I think kind of resembles how they're different. I stumbled upon my mom's weed when I was 14. I was had a close relationship with her, and she was a hairdresser. She often would be gifted baked goods and other things from her clients. And I went into the kitchen pantry one evening looking for some pastries that she may or may not have received from her clients recently. You never knew what could be in there. And I saw a box I'd never seen before and opened it up, and just like an old school stoner, she had a couple dime bags with some nugs in them. She had a dime bag of seeds, which probably shows that her stores home grew it themselves, is my guess. A couple packs of zigzags. And at the time I was 14, I'd already smoked, but still I thought that weed was drugs. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, my parents do drugs." And I brought it out to the living room to confront her. And she turned around with the full deer in the headlights look. And she went on to be honest and just say that one of her clients gave it to her. She takes a toke or two before she goes to the gym because it's more fun. And she offered to light up my first joint with me when I turned 16. I didn't take her up on that until I was in college. And we smoked a handful of times together, which was fun. On the flip side, my dad probably hasn't smoked since college. And once I got into the weed industry or the cannabis industry, we went on a trip to Denver together. And I remember one day after actually we went to the Rockies game, we were walking back to the hotel, and he decided to share a joint with me. And after a couple of puffs, like we stepped aside in the alley, and after a couple of puffs, he immediately was like, "You please get me home." And he was like freaked out because he hadn't smoked weed in 30 plus years, and the weed's very different these days. But sure enough, we got back to the room, and the hotel room, and I went to the bathroom. I came out of the bathroom, and my dad was just in the bed, covers literally pulled up to his neck, just like grinning ear to ear with the TV on, and all of a sudden he was enjoying himself. So
You're also at 5,000 plus feet, so that doesn't help.
exactly.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hey, those are both very good and personal stories, and I want to say thank you to both of my NorCal homies here. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for what you do at Headwaters. I mean, and Mr. Zips, continued success and great branding, and you can find your products at the Perfect Union chain of stores.
Indeed.
So
Thank you.
If you ever want to announce another product, please join us here on Dazed and Infused. Again, this has been Nick Brandis and Dave Podesta from Headwaters in Carpinteria, California. Thanks again, guys, and continued success, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Latham.
Thanks. Bye-bye.